Guys, I just checked out this clip of Netanyahu speaking to Erin Molan, who I'm actually due to be interviewing soon, where he said explicitly, as I and many others have been calling for a while now, that Israel is going to become, in terms of its military and arms productions, independent from America. This is good for Israel. It's good for everyone. America, our dependence on them is dangerous, and it's, the future of American relations towards Israel is completely up in the air. By the way, I think even if Israel was still somewhat dependent on America for arms, they should still do whatever they need to do security-wise, even if there's a diplomatic disagreement. But obviously, this approach will make it easier, and it's essential for security reasons and just to be a sovereign state. Let's have a watch of what Netanyahu has to say. This is important.
You were a few moments late, clearly running a country, so you're forgiven, but I'm glad you were, because this headline just dropped, and I want to start the interview by asking for your reaction to it. It's on the Axios news site, and it says, Scoop, Israel seeks 20-year military aid deal with US with America First tweaks. Is that correct?
I don't know what they're talking about. My direction is the exact opposite. When I first became prime minister in 1996, I went to the U.S. Congress, and we were receiving financial aid and military aid. And I said, the first thing is, we're going to build a high-tech, free market capitalist economy. We don't need the financial aid. Phase it out. And everybody gasped. How dare he, this young prime minister, eager for a PR title. He's giving up billions of dollars. And I was happy to do it, and I was right to do it. So we got rid of that. Now I want to make our arms industry independent, totally as independent as possible. So my direction is the exact opposite. I don't know who's talking for Israel. I do. So follow what I say, not what is put forward in some leaks that are not true.
So, Prime Minister, you think it's time to cut military aid entirely from the US?
I think it's time to assure that Israel is independent. Understand that our military aid is like a fraction, a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what the U.S. spent in Afghanistan or spent in, in the Middle East. It's tiny. But, I think that we have a very strong economy. We have a very strong arms industry. And it's true that even though we get what we get, which we appreciate, 80% of that is spent in the United States. So it produces jobs in the United States. But nevertheless, I'd like to see a much more independent Israeli, and even more independent Israeli defense industry. And remember that Israel doesn't ask others to fight for us. Israel is the one American ally in the world that says, we need boots on the ground. We don't need American servicemen fighting, on the ground for Israel or around Israel. We're fine. We fight our own battles, but in doing so, we also serve important American interests, like preventing countries that chant death to America from having nuclear bombs to throw at America, and so on. So my direction is independence. My direction is not greater dependence. My direction is greater independence. And I'll probably have something to say about that very soon.
What's a realistic timeline for that?
Oh, I think we're already, we're already going there. In fact, this afternoon, I'm having a very important meeting exactly on this subject.
Now, this is a fantastic, fantastic move forward. And the reason is because dependence on aid creates pressures and limits sovereignty. And who spoke about this quite clearly and quite plainly? The Lubavitcher Rebbe. I've been reading about this in the book Make Peace by Alicia Pearl. The Rebbe warned that any country relying on another for money, especially in defense, becomes completely vulnerable to political pressure. And when a government knows that upsetting Washington might put aid at risk, it may hesitate on critical life and death decisions. I remember learning that he said it's a bit like saying, it's okay, we can allow our house to burn because we've got insurance, we've got fire insurance, whatever. And it's just a mad way to think. The Rebbe taught, Israel must act according to what protects Jewish lives, not what pleases another government. An aid creates a psychological and political dependency that undermines real sovereignty, and a nation's security decisions must be purely security decisions. Now, for a long time, part of the security decision was having to maintain diplomatic relations with America. And that's fine, but it can't be the expense of making security decisions that are in our interests. And as I said, the future of American-Israel relations remains very unclear. On the left and the right, there's rising hostility, not just to Israel, to Jews. And let's be honest, was there ever really much difference? No. I'm sure there'll be also lots of Americans who will be shocked by this and want to push back, but it is unclear what the future is. And as the Rebbe pointed out, US military aid comes with conditions, restrictions, diplomatic expectations. Israel even planned at one point in making fighter jets of its own, and America said, stop that or we won't give you our fighter jets or our aid. This is not healthy. And by the way, even the ones who are hostile to Israel are also, in America, are also saying we don't want to be giving our aid. So this is good for all people in this position. The Rebbe said that, Israel has talent, resources, economy, and innovation to be self-sufficient, and that independence will actually allow for a lot more international respect of Israel. So the other danger that he spoke about was that foreign aid creates dangerous expectations. Israel being forced to prove that it's cooperative. Even, Israel might feel the need to make territorial concessions, delay necessary military actions, adopt policies that weaken its deterrence. I remember when Bibi stood up to the Biden administration, and he said, we're going into Rafah either way, even if we have to fight with our hands and nails. But it was also a sign of the fact that there was so much dependence. Now, of course, he stood up to them, and that was fantastic and amazing, but this move is clearly the right one. True friendship should not be based on dependence. When you're both strong and independent, that can actually strengthen the relationship because you don't have underlying resentments. Friendship should be based on mutual respect and not dependency, basically. So I think this is very positive and exactly what Israel needs to be doing now.
Before we wrap up, I want to share something important with you. The entire anti-Israel movement is built on one central accusation, that in 1948, Israel stole the land, and ever since, Palestinians have simply been resisting. But what if everything we've been told about this story is untrue? What if the real history of 1948 shows not Arabs being forced out, but Jews, while seeking peace, having to fight for their survival against a genocidal enemy that willed its destruction long before Israel's re-establishment? Have a watch of the trailer for our new, groundbreaking and essential documentary entitled What Really Happened in 1948. And if you want to see the full film, just click the link in the video description. In 1948, the world witnessed the rebirth of the Jewish state, the State of Israel. A moment celebrated as a miracle of survival and self-determination after centuries of persecution and the horrors of the Holocaust. Yet for decades, this event has been twisted into a narrative of theft and catastrophe, with the so-called Nakba portrayed as Israel's original sin, where Jews allegedly stole Arab land and displaced innocents in a premeditated act of ethnic cleansing. But what if this story is fundamentally inverted? What if the cause and effect are the other way around? Not Israel aggressively seizing territory and Arabs responding in self-defense, but Arabs, driven by deep-seated hatred, rejecting the Jews' legal and historical rights to live in their ancestral homeland and waging a genocidal war long before Israel's re-establishment. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to uncover the unvarnished truth about 1948, the centuries of pogroms and anti-Semitic violence that set the stage, the Arab leaders' explicit calls for extermination, and the defensive war Israel fought to secure its existence. We'll challenge the pervasive lies head-on, showing how Arab rejection of peace wasn't about creating a Palestinian state, but about denying Jews the right to live at all. From the Nazi-allied leader of the Arabs in Palestine, the Mufti al-Husseini, to the forgotten occupations by Jordan and Egypt, when no Palestinian state was even considered, this is the story of a conflict rooted not in displacement, but in whether the Jews deserve to live in their homeland. Join us as we debunk the myths with facts, confront the historical record fairly but firmly, and reveal why 1948 was not an act of aggression, but a righteous response to annihilation. This is what really happened in 1948. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.